If they want to take over a basketball game and want their team to win, they will carry the team on their back and will that team to win. And I think, top salespeople are the same way. If you go out and you're really good at influencing customers and working hard, you can influence the number in your territory like no one else. I think where it changes in leadership is it becomes more than just about you. And, interviewing is a perfect example. I think that the example of hire your buddy, I actually fell into this trap. My first 1 to 2 management jobs. We do. But here's why is it, the person's good and you saw them perform in the role that you saw them perform in, right? But what you don't know how to take into account, and I think this is the true development as a leader, one of the pieces is where is this person now at in their career? And how would what they did then transition here to what we need to do? And what is this person looking for? And is this a good fit for where they're at in their life right now, what they want in their career? I think that's a thing that a lot of hiring managers, the conventional wisdom is, and the conventional thought is you go into the interview and you're going to try to find, of your 5 or 6 top candidates, you're going to find the one that you think is the best for the company, right? Well, I think, you're going to find 2 or 3 that probably, could they do the job? Absolutely. Yes. In most cases you could. But to me, I think the way I like to look at it is, of these people, who is this company in our situation here the best fit for? Like where they're at in their life, what they want in their career, what looks like long-term, because what you don't want is that person a year or 2 later, they're looking for another job because it's just like the job that they just came from. And I think, and then, leading and team meeting, that's, I think the other thing that you look at someone like a Steve Kerr, who's done quite well as a basketball coach.
Yeah.
He wasn't their best player, but he was the point guard of the team, right? He was probably a B+ point guard, really good player, very good player. But his job was to distribute the ball and to really run the flow of the whole team. And he had to connect with everybody, right? And I think that's, to me, that's the next level of leadership is really, even if you're a top producer, understanding how do I connect with this person that's at 85 to 90% to their number? And can I really try to understand, how I connect with this person? Why do they sell? What are their challenges? What do they try to do to work through these challenges? And is there a way that I can help them build a development plan and support them to get them to that 100%, even if it's 95? It's, if you can move that middle up just another 10%, those are the sales leaders that are really, really good.
Yeah.
So I think your example is perfect though. I mean, that's exactly what I think about is people like Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson.
Yeah. And, I'll say this because it's young professionals, it's usually in their 20s where they just start out. If you're trying to move from an associate to a full round rep, totally get it. You should try and do that as quickly as possible. Totally understand that. But 100%. People that
absolutely,
they get in a role and it's like after a year or 2, they're like, okay, I'm ready for the next thing. And I'm like, are you? And I think, I was one of those people, and I think that a lot of people just have to be a lot more patient with their careers and methodical in terms of like really developing. Like I'll give you an example. Is I was very impatient, right? Because our industry like really is terrible at marketing. That's a whole other conversation. But and I personally I don't believe in this whole thing of like you need X number of years of experience because like I was able to do more like in Missouri in marketing in 1 year than most people did in their entire careers, right? Yeah. That being said, for the people who are impatient, my thing is like, okay, you should hyper focus and just get not only take on as much responsibility, but just get an unbelievable amount of things done and deliver results at such an extreme level. It's you can't ignore it, right? That was my solution. But aside from that, I don't know, like I feel like there's too many young salespeople are just like really impatient and they just want to like make as much money as quickly as possible. And like maybe maybe they could do that, but I just feel like they're losing out like short-term gains for long-term consequences,
Yeah. No, you bring up a good point. And I think, in hindsight, that's one of those things where I was frustrated and I think I felt a lot of those things that I write about in the book of when I didn't get those first couple promotions. You feel like, You feel like you've proven yourself. You feel like you deserve it. You feel like it's the logical next step. But I think that, what I would caution people to think about is, what if you do get that job? And what if you're truly not ready? What then?
Man, that's such a good point.
And that's in hindsight. And there was another podcast I was on, and that was literally the first thing they called out before we even hopped on and started recording was, the value of not getting a promotion because you're not ready is actually a good thing. And in my case, I will say it was, because when I did get promoted and got my first management opportunity, and I talk about it in the book, if people want to, read about it, they can. But when I did get my first opportunity, it was a very, very challenging time in our company where we were going through a lot of change. We had a new VP of sales had come in. They completely switched the comp plan, disrupted a bunch of territories. And so I had to lead through a lot of that. And I just think, had I been promoted 4 years before and had to go through all of that without the extra 4 years of training that I ended up getting, it was hard enough as it was. There is no way that would have gone well. And so, sometimes not getting an opportunity can truly be a blessing in disguise. And as hard as it is to get that feedback, I would encourage people, don't think about it like, oh, I deserve this opportunity. And you may feel that way, but I think really try to look at it from the shoes of the senior leader making the decision of who to put there, and think through, all right, well, let me get in their head. Why did they put this person there? Why did they feel they were ready? And then what do I need to do to take a step back and either build the skills or show them that I have it? So but I think it's not always a bad thing getting passed up for a job.
No. And then, there's I think, I don't know what chapter this is. It's towards the end, but like you had some things to consider that are not focused on the person with questions, which is like on the leader that you're dealing with, like what's on their agenda? What are they hoping to accomplish in the meeting? What do they really need? What's their perception of me, and how am I relaying this information? What steps can I offer to take best to support their goals? I'll tell you, like, there's a book, actually, I have the companion version here on my desk, and I have the thicker one behind me called 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And one of the laws that I used to violate all the time was law number 1, which is never outshine the master. And so I think a lot of people, when they're trying to get promoted, they do these things that they think makes them look good, which does, but as a result makes their boss look bad. And I think my career changed the moment that I was able to put myself in my boss's position and think, what can I do to make my boss look really good to their boss? And at that time, it was usually, I was reporting to the VP or directly to the CEO. So it's like, how do they look good to the CEO and or board? And I think just when you sit at that level and start focusing on the team and the person you report to and not just on yourself, I feel like that's when you start getting the answers of like, oh, this is what I got, versus kind of like doing it in your head. Plus, like from a sales standpoint, this is like an old, it's like old sales heuristic, but it just makes so much sense. It's like, sometimes you just have to ask, like, Buck, when I'm dealing with a surgeon, I would often just ask like, hey, look, what do I got to do to get this technology into the hospital, right? They're going to give you an answer. They're going to tell you exactly what you got to do, versus like trying to like do some fancy, question framework. And I think maybe sometimes with leadership, it's just like, hey, really want to get into this position. What do I got to do that? What are the steps? The other side of it, Bret, that I wonder what your thoughts are, is a lot of times you could be in this position, at least for me, I'm a startup guy, where you have the package, everything is there that makes sense. Like, you should be absolutely promoted. The problem is that the company can't do that, because the moment they promote you, they don't have anybody to backfill you. And there's almost this thing where if you're too good at your job and you do too many things, you're almost at a risk if you get promoted. How do you navigate something like that?
Yeah, and I think that, great point. And I think that is the responsibility that I would say you should put on yourself if you're trying to get promoted, regardless of what level. You should always be thinking through, who is going to backfill me? If I get promoted and this all shakes out how I want to, who would be an appropriate backfill? And then how do I help make sure that person is developed and ready, and that they could make that a smooth transition if the time comes. Great point. I think that's something, and that happens a lot of the time, where they promote, companies will promote a leader and they don't think through that next phase of, oh, well, who are we going to get to backfill that role? And all of that, they don't have enough time to do it. And so then eventually there's a talent gap at somewhere along the organization. There becomes a talent gap, or they have to go externally to try to hire someone into that role. And obviously, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. There's a cultural fit, risk to that if someone from the outside comes in, and a way I think that to manage that. But I think that's something that I say is super important. You should always be thinking through that. If you want to get promoted from one level to the next, is who can take my role? And if I can help develop someone or have someone ready and I can highlight that, that makes me even more attractive.
It's a great point.
The person I'm hiring with, because that's an extra hire that it may actually fall into place.
It makes it, I think it's a really good point. And I think that a lot of our conversation today was very much focused on intention, very focused intention, but also awareness of the people that you're going to be dealing with. And then what are the events that are going to happen, like if and when that promotion ends up happening, I think that's a big, like if you took your book, and again, there's 10 steps, and I'll leave a link for the listeners below. I highly recommend getting it. My listeners know, I read a lot of books, so I say that that I would recommend the book. No, they know they should get it. So be sure to get Bret's book. But I think a big theme that everything ties together, that ties the book together, is just having intention with what you're doing, having a plan, and then having extreme awareness of the perception and who you're dealing with, the perception of the company, these kind of things. And I think that that's why I liked your book and I wanted to have you on the show, which is, too often the advice in our industry is just just work hard to hit your number and everything else will follow. And it's just that's just not how it works. That's not how it ever works,
Yeah. 100%. That's a piece of it. That's a key piece, but there's a lot more that goes into it than that. And a lot more that people can do if they know the logical steps that they can take.
Absolutely. Well, Bret, just kind of in wrapping up, I got a few rapid fire questions for you, so you can take as long as you want to answer these. So first question to you is that, chapter of your book actually talks about going to outside resources. Continuing education is a big thing for our customers, right? What's a book, can't say your own, what's a book or a podcast that you've checked out recently that you've really enjoyed, you feel like you've recommended it a lot?
I would say, well, it depends on what topic you're into, but if it's on the leadership topic, I would say anything that Jocko Willink has written. Extreme Ownership, The Dichotomy of Leadership. He's got several other books. I think he does a really good job, and obviously, he has just an extreme amount of experience as a Navy SEAL leader, in probably some of the most difficult leadership situations someone would find themselves in. But he's got a very human way of taking leadership principles, but also teaching how to build in the flexibility that you need to have at certain times. And also really how to include your team in the plan, which, I think the perception people have of the military sometimes is it's a lot of barking orders, a lot of directing from the top down, and I'm sure there's certainly parts of that, but I think it's really enlightening to hear his examples, and I would say all of them translate into what we do in the corporate world.
Totally. So yeah, I do recommend his books. His books are really good. We were at Petro Medical. Extreme Ownership was given to all of us in director and management roles, so we had to read it. Next question for you is, if there was a billboard, or I guess in the digital age, a text notification that showed up on the cell phones of every medical sales rep in the country, right, for a year, every single day, what message would you put on there for them and why?
Learn how to sell your customer's problem.
Ooh, I that's a great one. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Well, I think what happens, and this is, it's human nature in sales in general, is you work for a company and you have a couple products, a couple widgets, or maybe a service or a platform or something, right? And I think it's most salespeople are going to go in and they're going to try to sell the widget. And they're going to go in, hey, we have this new knee implant system. We have this new wound dressing. We have this new, catheter for urology patients, whatever it is, whatever space you're in, you have products that you sell. And I think it's human nature to go in and want to sell the product, tell how great it is, show the clinical studies, maybe get into the health economics of it. But I think the really, really high level salespeople, And, and I do corporate account stuff now. So I think when you start talking at scale of like a whole health system, what you've got to do is really start with what's on my customer's agenda. Like, what are the overarching problems they're trying to solve? And let's start with that. And then if you can do that, flip that upside down and not lead with the product, but really lead with the problem that obviously your product is a solution for, you're going to engage customers in a lot better way. And you're also going to differentiate yourself, because most sales reps are going to go in and they're going to lead with the widget. And so I would say, don't do that. Start with the problem that they're trying to solve, that is already on their agenda, that they have meetings they're trying to fix, and you're going to align to that. You're going to have their attention. So,
yeah. And if I can get like a little meta with you, I think that's also great advice for getting promoted, which is start with your manager's problem versus selling the widget of yourself, which is like, oh, I did all these great things, everything. Nobody really cares.
It's at every level, right? Whether it's internal customers or external customers, whoever you're trying to influence, they've got a job they're trying to do too. They're trying to solve problems. And if you can align to that, you're gonna be far more likely to engage them.
Totally. Well, Bret, this has been fantastic. So for those who are listening, please check the show notes below. Buy Bret's book. Be sure to follow him on LinkedIn. He has great content there. It's been another episode of the State of MedTech. I'm your host, Omar and Khateeb, and we'll see you all next time.